Hi, I'm Jo Clark, and thanks so much for joining me today. This is the Redefining Midlife podcast, a podcast designed for the 40-plus woman who is determined to challenge society's myths and beliefs around midlife. It's for the woman who is inspired and ready to define midlife her way. Join me each week as I chat to health and wellness experts for up-to-date information on how to live well as some special conversations with incredible everyday women redefining what midlife can look like. Here's to making our next half of life even better than the first. One thing I love about this podcast is the opportunity I have to interview incredible everyday women, and this episode is a perfect example of that. Now, deciding if or when to have a baby is a big decision for most women, with so many layers attached. There's no black or white answer, and every single woman will have her own unique set of circumstances to take into account. These can include things like career, relationships, fertility issues, age, financial security, support networks, and so on. And the road to parenthood for some women can be long and difficult. Today on the podcast, you'll meet Meg Parkinson. As one of 5 children, Meg grew up on a property in Western Queensland. After boarding school, she trained as a teacher and established a successful career. Meg was ticking all of the boxes. However, it was after a relationship breakup in her early 30s that a colleague asked Meg if she was worried that she mightn't have children of her own. And this hadn't even occurred to Meg before because she thought that she would meet somebody one day and they'd start a family. But her 30s sped by and quickly became her 40s. It was then that Meg decided to walk the path to motherhood on her own. Unfortunately, as many women discover, falling pregnant wasn't all that easy for Meg. And with every passing year, it was getting even more difficult. Now, Meg's story is one of incredible hope, love, and determination. And I want to thank Meg for bravely sharing her raw and vulnerable journey with us. And as you'll hear, it has an incredible blockbuster-like ending. Welcome, Meg, to the podcast. Our conversation today is going to be one that's going to touch people's hearts. It's going to be a story that women, and many women, are going to be able to relate to. And on all levels, they're going to discover what a beautiful human you are and what an incredible story that you are going to be sharing with us today. So thank you for coming along onto the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Jo. Does it matter if I'm crying at the beginning? That was beautiful.
No, not at all, Meg. It is a very special story, but I want people to be able to understand who Meg is right from the get-go. So we're going to do a bit of time travel now, and I'd love for you to share about younger Meg and where you grew up and what your childhood was like.
So I grew up in Western Queensland on a sheep property outside of Cunnamulla, which is about 10 hours west of Brisbane. And I actually had a really lovely childhood. I think it was one that really helped shape who I've become, because when you're from Western Queensland, you learn to be a risk taker because you're out on motorbikes, you're out riding horses, you're really, I think, independent, and you have to look after yourself, and there are jobs to do.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that I had that experience, because I think I think other people, people from the city just have a different way of learning those things.
You see the beauty of life when you're living out west as well, don't you? You see the harshness and the whole life cycle is in front of your face from a very young age. So not only are you getting all of those experiences that you just mentioned, you're also seeing what life is, what life can be like. You're seeing the drought, then you see the flooding rains, and then the life that comes out of that, and the cycles of the animal. It's quite incredible growing up for kids.
I think so. But I also feel really privileged because we were able to go to the city, we were able to go to the beach. We didn't go on overseas holidays or anything, but the other thing that I loved about my childhood was the community, and how, every weekend we'd go to tennis and everyone was at tennis, and so much playing and fun. And yeah, we're just really lucky. And then when I was 10, I believe, I went away to school. I went to a primary school in Toowoomba, and that was also really fun. It was not a terrible thing. And
yes, because my children grew up on an isolated property around the Cunnamulla district as well. And the kids grow up knowing that they're going to be going away to boarding school. Parents in the city often say, oh, if you're naughty, you're going to go to boarding school. We'll send you there as a threat. Whereas growing up, children always knew that they were going to be going away
to school? And that's another conversation in itself when you're a parent going through that. But as kids, you knew that was just going to be part and parcel of it, and that was what was common, and that was everyone just went away to school.
Yep, everybody did it. So it was not unusual at all.
So you obviously had a lot of experiences growing up and in your younger years. What was life like then when you were a younger woman in your late teens and early 20s?
Well, it was fun. I was at uni. I went to Armidale Uni and did teaching. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I liked the idea of being a psychologist. It was always going to be something to do with children. But then I thought, well, it might be best to be a teacher because then I can work with the children every day. But I think the thing that I learned when I first became a teacher was that you think you're going to be a really great teacher and really nice and love all the kids, but then real stuff happens and you just sometimes go back into your default system of sometimes how your parents might have spoken to you, and sometimes I didn't think I was a very nice person. So that led me to start to learn how to manage children and their behavior and help them learn in ways that didn't ruin the relationship, because yelling at somebody is never okay. And sometimes in the moment I would find myself doing that. And obviously I don't like that idea, because in the end, you just want the children to be calm and feel ready to learn.
Yeah.
If they're bringing things from home or they're having difficulties with their friends, they're just not ready to learn. So my philosophy, I suppose, was to get them ready to learn, and then also make myself redundant because I wanted them to be able to do it themselves. So I suppose I realized a lot of the parents would come in and they would say, well, I just don't know what to do. They were all trying to do the best they could as well. And so I thought, well, it was easy for me to get the information as a teacher to help children, but how do parents get it? And I know there are programs out there, but a lot of them, I think, are for parents who are really struggling with their own lives.
So more for crisis help. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think
programs
so.
out there for parents who are.
Yeah, and there are they're very health based, so there's not really problem solving within them for each individual family, because in families where the parents are professionals, they're already doing a lot of amazing things with their kids. It's just when it gets tough, what do you do then? When you don't know what to do, what do you do?
Yeah.
And that's the people I like to help, because there's no funding for that. There's no not a lot of information, and you don't want to have to wade through a whole book just to get a little bit of assistance.
Yeah. And they're such lifelong skills, aren't they? If you can teach parents, then you can teach the children. Those children have got those skills then that they can pass on. So that circle just gets larger and larger, because had the parents not known, then they would be treating their child differently. That child will be learning a set of skills completely different. So they pass the not so successful skills on. So having what you're doing really helps to broaden understandings and knowledge of how to best cater for behavioural challenges when they arise.
Exactly. And while I teach how to discipline as opposed to punishment, that's just such a small part of it. Mainly it's about how to communicate.
Yeah.
So how to communicate so that you continue to have high expectations but keep the relationship.
Yeah.
And it's actually easy once you know how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you don't know what you don't know. So if someone's there to guide you through it all, that makes it that much easier. And so Meg, you had that business, you started up a business where you were helping parents with those skills, learning those skills. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. Right, parent.
Yeah. And so what do you just hold one-on-one sessions? How do you normally work with parents when they're?
I do one-on-one and classes. So I was doing face-to-face classes, but when I start up again, it'll all be online.
Yeah.
things have changed.
Yes.
And just do a lot of talks in daycare centres, because I think the earlier you get to learn these skills, and the easier
sure.
the rest of the journey is. Sorry,
Yeah.
I hate
I know, but it's apt. What other word do you use? The journey. But it is. It's kind of
journey.
like, what do you call it? And I sort of cringe at that term as well. My toes curl, but yeah,
No.
find another word with for it.
Yeah.
In fact, I think it might even be in one of the questions I'm going to ask you. So strap yourself in. So
Yeah.
Meg, at the moment, your business is on hold, and we'll talk about why it's on hold very, very shortly. But if people want more information on this, because they're, they might be finding themselves in the situation that you've just described, I've got your links to your website and your Facebook page, so people can look there deeply. Yeah.
Oh, great.
So your journey to parenthood was long and difficult, and that's something that's shared by many women. I'm going to share a little bit of what you wrote to me recently. Okay, so you said, it was after a relationship breakup in her early 30s that a colleague asked Meg if she was worried that she wouldn't have children of her own. This hadn't even occurred to Meg. She thought that she would meet someone one day and they would start a family. Though as her 30s sped by and became her 40s, she realised that even though there were sometimes men around to date, she didn't feel like having children with any of them. She still wasn't too worried. Her mother and her grandmother had children naturally in their early 40s. She was just following a family tradition, but still, it was time to act. So we know for many, many women, deciding to have a baby and then getting pregnant is not always easy, but you had a few extra levels of difficulty added to that, being a single woman. So for you, without a partner, IVF, and then getting older as well, because, we talk a lot on this show about perimenopause and menopause, that made things sort of even more difficult. Can you take us through the early stages of your journey on how, you started IVF and how long that process took before you went, oh, it's not really working for me?
Yeah. Well, I think I was just about to turn 40, and that's when I went, oh, this is weird. Like, everything's gone so quickly, and now I'm at this age that I have to really worry about this. I was in a relationship that was a bit wispy, I thought, and I had to make the decision because it was really hard for me to decide whether to have a child on my own, meaning the child would have no father, or do I have a child with this person and then at least the child has a father? And
wow.
For me, the question was, which is the selfish option?
Yes.
That's
a real moral dilemma, isn't it? I mean, really,
that took me a few years. That honestly took me a couple of years. And in the end, I chose to try with this man. But I only did that for 2 months. and just in making the decision helped me to realize, no, that's the wrong decision. And I went, no, I want to be a happy person, and then the child will be a happy child. So I had to let go of that idea of the child having a father. And so I went I'd probably already been to the doctor, I think, just to check my viability, to see whether I was going to be okay. And everything was good. Everything was, oh my goodness, you've got so many eggs. And I said, I'm going to be fine. And this is what I thought. I'm going to be fine. It's in my family. We have children in our 40s. I'm good. You have to prove that you're socially infertile first, which means that you have to do the old turkey basting for 2 cycles before you can get any Medicare, before they'll pay some of your IVF.
Yes.
So I did that, and they didn't work. So then I did one IVF cycle, and it all looked good, got loads of eggs, but I did a transfer, but that didn't work. I did another one, and for the second cycle, I did a thing called PGD testing, and they checked to find out if there are any chromosomal problems or any mutations in the cell. And all of mine had mutations, except for the one that looked the best. The cell died, like it just didn't make it to the lab.
Okay.
But that one was looking really good and was growing beautifully. So my doctor said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I didn't want to knowingly have a child that had a disability or a difficulty.
Yeah.
I just didn't think that was going to help the child or me.
Yeah.
So I actually chose then not to do any more IVF cycles.
So how many was that in total by the time you
I only
reached the
did,
decision?
well, four
Okay.
cycles so far.
Yep.
And I just thought, well, probably will be one in there, but I worked in education and had a part-time business of my own. I couldn't just throw money at it. Like you hear of people just doing thousands of IVF cycles and selling their house. I just couldn't do that. And I actually thought, well, if I can get a young, good egg, is that actually going to be better? So I gave up the idea of my own egg really easily. And I think that's really hard for a lot of people, but I understand that. But it was really important for me to have a child who was had the best start that they could have.
Yeah.
So then, amazingly, a friend of mine had gone through our IVF using a donor egg themselves. So they understood the situation, and they had some more embryos that left over, and they donated those to me. So it was just incredible. I thought that anyone would do that. I mean, I still think, would I do that for somebody?
Yeah, that is an amazing gift to give to a person, isn't it?
It really is. So my doctor said, no, it's too close. It's too awkward. Anyway, they had 16, I think, embryos left, so a lot. But none of them worked. I was cut to the chase. I think within that, I think I did about 8 cycles. So I didn't ever during all of that time take a pregnancy test because it was too final, but I would get my period and no, and then I would have to go to do a blood test because that was one of the rules from the clinic. And then my doctor would call and say whether it worked or not. And
you must have been dreading that call. Yeah.
So that wasn't fun because you just every time just think, it's gonna be it, and in your mind you just make it seem like everything's okay. Anyway, none of those worked. And then since I have George, because we all know there's a happy ending to
there
this.
is a happy ending, which I love.
I had met up with that couple, and it was weird driving to have our breakfast, and I thought, oh, this would be so weird if I was going there. There would be a really close association with these people. They were such lovely, giving, fun, beautiful people. So it would have been okay, but it just wasn't meant to be. So then my doctor told me, she said, somebody has donated some embryos to her to give to one of her patients, and she offered them to me. And I just went, oh my God, this is amazing. That's just so lucky because that doesn't happen in Australia much. So I went back to the fertility clinic. You have to go through counselling every time you change your way of getting pregnant. And back to doing cycles, and again, none of those worked. So I just...
How old were you by that stage, Meg?
I think I was about 44, 45. No, I was probably 46.
Okay.
Sorry. It all melds in.
It does.
Yeah, so you had to wait. So they had to go through all the legal. There were things that had to happen before they were ready to be given to a person. And then I think I did another probably 6 of those cycles. There were quite a few of those embryos as well, and they were really good quality. It just seemed like it could work. So the way they grade them is 4AA, which is it's like getting a 990 in your
yeah.
It's a really good mark. Whereas the ones I'd used previously, they were B quality, and none of them worked.
Oh.
So then I just didn't. You just don't know. Like, is this me? Am I infertile, or is it the quality or something with the embryo?
Mm.
And it's with different doctors. They have different opinions. They have different cycles that you go through. The science is amazing, but it's still up to the doctors to determine what they think is best.
Yeah, right.
And at one point, my doctor was sick and I went to a different doctor, and I would always ask the question. I said, so we've got so many embryos here. If we defrost them all and then find which ones are the healthiest ones, like when they start to grow again, wouldn't I be best to just start there?
Mm-hmm.
I was always looking at it a little bit from a financial,
yes, of course you would be,
position as well.
yeah.
And that doctor said, yes, that is the best thing to do. I think there's a 1% chance that you would lose some of the viability when you refreeze.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did that. And my other doctor was receiving all of the information. And she said when she saw that came through, that I defrosted them all, she nearly died, because that's not her opinion of what you would do.
Right.
So I don't know whether I did the wrong thing there, of doing that.
You were still guided by a specialist.
I was guided by a very well-respected specialist that I'd been recommended to go and see.
Okay.
Anyway, so in the end, they refroze, and a lot of them I still did transfers. They still were okay for a transfer, but none of them worked, as I've said. And then I didn't know what to do because there were no more little miracles. So I started to go online and find egg donors in Australia. And then I did find them, and my doctor said, she couldn't believe it. She said, well, I don't know, you must be an amazing writer or something, because nobody finds this number of donors. But something always went wrong in the end. Like they'd say, oh no, we found a family friend who wants them. I said no to 3 other ladies in the end. It just wasn't going to fit with me.
Yeah.
And that was hard. That was so hard.
Yes.
Getting them, which was rare apparently, and then saying no.
Yeah. So it must be just such an emotional roller coaster you had been going on. You'd get your hopes up, and then there'd be dash, and hopes up and dash. I mean, that's got to be so stressful and take its toll after.
Yeah. So initially I was really open with my friends. I would tell them, and then after a while, this is sad. This makes me sad. It does make you feel like you're a failure.
Yeah.
Sorry, it doesn't make you feel that. That's how I felt.
Yeah.
And so I stopped telling my friends because of that feeling. Sorry.
Yeah. No, Meg, I can totally understand why that would upset you, because women who go through that whole cycle usually have a partner that they can share the load with. But I mean, you were probably in a completely different situation where you didn't have that as well. So you're dealing with this all by yourself. It would have been incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I suppose it might have been more difficult being on my own, but because I started working with an amazing lady who's at Noosa. Her name is Katie Weber. And in a way, I think it's so much easier having, or maybe, I don't know the other side, of course, having a professional to work with. I didn't have to also trying to manage somebody else's emotions.
Yes. Yes.
So, I mean, that's my take on it. Obviously, it's lovely to have a partner and somebody there to support you, but it's there for them as well. It's hard
Absolutely.
for them.
Yeah, that's a
And
great point.
I know that from when I was with this other guy, because actually I'd started the process on my own. And I have mentioned it was a bit dysfunctional, but he was still around.
Yeah.
So I did have him there for a little while. And yeah, it was a little bit of managing. And through the process, I've learned so much. And now I just think, well, I probably had to go through that to learn and become I wouldn't say it's probably not a better person, but a little bit more insightful, maybe a little bit more understanding of other people's situations, and less judgy about other people. A lot of the beliefs that I had about life and about how things have to be, I've had to give those away and give and to learn then that beliefs are changeable. And well, there's so much more out there than what I used to think about. I can't explain it, but in terms of what is possible if you actually take the steps. And it doesn't have to be a fertility journey or whatever.
That's right. Anybody who's gone through a personal growth development gets exactly what you're talking about. It's such an important part of who you're becoming as a woman or as a person. But
and everybody has their difficulty that they have to work through.
Yes.
And I think I was so lucky that I got to work with somebody that was able to show me how life could be.
Yes.
And able to say, to be quite strong with me, but also really gentle. So everyone would love to have a partner, someone to share their life with. That wasn't where I was at the time. And I got to work with a lady who helped me through the process at every step. So
that's fabulous.
I was supported. I had to pay for
it. Big thanks to Katie for doing that and getting you through that stage too.
Yeah.
So from that point then, Meg, where we know that there's a happy ending.
Yeah.
And we know that what you went through wasn't working. So this is
so by
kind
now,
of like the final chapter of your journey as far as a pregnancy.
We're there.
There we go. I said the word journey. Said it.
I know. I said it too. I heard myself. So by then, I think I was about 47. I rang my doctor to say that I wasn't going to go ahead. And I said to her, I think I'm getting a bit old. I probably have to decide when to stop. And so I knew that there was another option. It was a more expensive option. But I didn't know what to do. I just thought these really good quality embryos have not worked. It must be something to do with me. But I just wanted to know if I got a really young, juicy egg, the first in the cycle, would it work? But I was also really concerned about my age. I had Katie telling me that was a concept of the mind and that I had to get past it. But it was also my doctor. I remember I was standing next to a big dumpster at school because it was a really private spot that I could talk. And she said, don't let age be the thing that stops you. And I just thought, okay, so if a professional person who knows my health history, and she said it, I've got to try. I've got to know.
Yeah.
And the other option was to go to South Africa, and they have a really great donor program over there. They have different laws, so you can go over there. That you can choose from a huge bank of donor profiles, egg donors, of course.
Mhm.
They have sperm donors as well. That's easy to come by in Australia as well as South Africa. So it was because of the eggs that I was going there.
Yeah.
So I decided to go, but I didn't have any money. I was lucky to have a home. So I'd been using my home loan and remortgaging. And yeah, I did find somebody to help me. So they'd said yes. Within 10 days, I'd organized everything. I was going to leave in the end of February in 2020? When was COVID?
Oh gosh, yes. When did the world? No, 2020.
Yeah,
And I'm
2020.
like you, man. It's all the last couple of years with everything that's happened in the world is, yes, we should have had that burned into our brain.
Yes. So I was going to leave February 2020. And then it was my birthday of 2019, which is December. This person ran and said, I've decided against it. It's probably dodgy what you're going to do. And they pulled the finance. And that's their choice. That's absolutely their choice. And then, of course, then COVID came, and I had to wait a couple of years before I could find the money myself. Once it was time for me to go, I got my doctor to write a letter to get an exemption to travel for medical reasons. And I got there and I had a message from the doctor, and I just, oh, that is so lovely. He's welcoming me to South Africa. And then I read in the message that he'd had to cancel the donor's cycle for medical reasons, and that cycle was not going to happen.
Oh.
And I just went, oh my God, I'm just
you get
gone.
that news, you're in another country all by yourself, and you go, now what?
And I just went, no, I have to do hotel quarantine for nothing. That is not okay.
Yeah.
But then I read further on in the email and he said, well, we've got some spare eggs in the freezer. There are two donor options that I could choose from. So I chose one of those, and then you have to wait for that to defrost, and then they are then I suppose coupled with the sperm, and then the embryo starts to develop. It goes through different processes. So after 5 days, you go in and have the transfer. And anyway, they send updates, little emails,
yes,
as they develop. And I was watching it and I was going, oh, this actually looks worse than one of my cycles that I had done with my own eggs, because I think there were 17 or 18 at the beginning. There was only 2 left by about the 4th day of the development. And I got there on the 5th day, turned up, I thought, okay, this is good. And then I saw my doctor go around the corner and have this big discussion with a whole heap of people. And I was like, oh, that's ridiculous, thinking that's about me. It's not about me. Everything's fine. Anyway, then I saw my doctor and he said, come in. And he said, so sorry, but we can't do a transfer. And I think I said, oh, fuck.
Rightly so. That was...
And then I went, oh no, I'm just a crass Australian. Then he took me into the lab and showed me everything, just I suppose to help me with the processing.
Yeah.
Back into his office, and I was trying to find a solution in my mind. I was just thinking, there has to be something. There has to be a solution. And then I said to him, is there an option C? And I still don't know if I hadn't asked, because it was quite some time that he let me sit there and process. And I remember just being absolutely flabbergasted. I couldn't believe it. But he said yes. And I went, oh, okay, what is it? And he said, we've had a lady who is from Europe, and that's all the information he could tell me. she's had a very successful cycle. She has 2 healthy children and has another, I think there were 10 viable embryos that were really top quality. And I was welcome to have them again at no extra charge if I wanted them. And I said, yes, that would be great. And he said, no, you have to read through the information and check to see that this would work for you. So I read through all of that. And I actually went, oh, this is really good. I'd felt more comfortable with them than any other that I'd seen. Except I saw there was a picture of the sperm donor. And I'd forgotten momentarily that you can't see an adult photo of them. What it is a celebrity lookalike.
Right.
But to me, it was like a guy with really short hair, and it looked a bit to me like a mugshot. I was going, gosh, he could have chosen a better photo than his mugshot. But that's okay. That's all right. I think that's okay. And it wasn't until I got home that I went, oh, that's right. It's a celebrity lookalike. And he'd put Kelly Slater. And of course, you know, we never look like ours. It doesn't really mean anything. But it was obviously Kelly Slater when he had really short hair. But I think that tells a little bit about my state of mind at the moment, at the time. Anyway, I went back in. I said, I'd love to go ahead. So an hour later, they transferred 2 embryos. I asked for 2 because of my history of really good quality ones not working, and I'd rather the risk of 2 instead of the risk of none. The doctor over there said, no, you will have twins, and on your own, that is ridiculous. And I said, I just, can you please transfer 2? And he did. I traveled around Cape Town and surrounds, which was really fun because it was during COVID and there were no tourists. And I just felt very free, and I just loved the time there, apart from my stressing that was going on inside. And I hadn't told any friends or anybody that I had gone anywhere, but I had 2 friends that they were just going, what's going on? Like, why are you so busy? Because I kept saying, no, I'm really busy. I'm going here and there. And so I was in hotel quarantine, and I did tell 2 people. And so they then started ringing me every day to check that I was okay, because I told them that it hadn't worked. And I got to the point where I knew that I had to take the test, and I'd never taken a pregnancy test before because I couldn't do it. Anyway, I weighed on the stick, and I obviously did it incorrectly because when I looked, it said E, so it was an error. Oh, okay. So I waited another day because I wanted to make sure that I did the first wee of the day. You know,
I remember that. Yes.
And I did it. And then I put it up on the bench. It was a bit similar to like in the movies, where I just went, hasn't worked, so I won't bother with that. Packed up the drugs. And then I looked at it, and it said pregnant, but it had a flashing light next to it. So I was just going, oh my God, somebody has designed this bloody thing saying pregnant, but it's going to flash up in a minute saying not. That's terrible. That's so mean to do that to people. And I came back and it said 4.5 weeks pregnant. And I just went, oh my God, it's saying it. I actually don't think I still don't think I believe it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I got on my call with Katie, and Katie is a very practical person, teaches practical skills to help you work through things, but she also is very connected somehow to the universe and what's going on. And I couldn't say the words when I spoke to her. I said, I did the test, and I don't know what I said, actually. I can't remember. She said, you have to say it to me. I said, it said I was pregnant. And she said, yes, you are. And then I went through the process of getting a blood test in hotel quarantine, which was crazy and kind of funny. And then my doctor called because eventually she got the results, and she said it's a really high reading. She said, I don't know if it's 1 or 2. And I think I was out of quarantine for about a week before I had the 6-week appointment with her, my first scan where they check for heartbeat and so forth. And it was then that I found out that was only 1 embryo. So that was a little bit of a risk that paid off, luckily.
Yes. Yeah. And so you've got beautiful George.
Yeah, and now I have George.
And
I had
he's an absolute delight.
He's gorgeous. He really is a beautiful, happy little baby who eats and sleeps and laughs and crawls like a bear. And he's now 1. So he was actually born at 36 weeks.
Yeah.
And he didn't have to go into ICU at all. He came straight up with me. He was perfect and totally ready. And he's by the time he was 6 weeks old, they said he'd reached all his growth milestones that he should have for a full-term baby. And now he's
absolutely thriving. He's a big boy. I can attest to that. He's the most delicious little baby. He's gorgeous. You want to get your hands on him.
And there was one thing I was a bit worried about, that I'd go through all this and then I'd have him and I'd go, oh, this is hard. This is, what if I got postnatal depression? What if it's not what I really want? But it is. I just feel I'm nearly thankful for the whole process, because I just feel so grateful every time I look at him that he came to me. And
he is so loved, and what an incredibly lucky little young man he is to have someone who is so dearly loved, because a lot of children do not have that.
No, and I don't feel any lack for not having a partner or a father for him at this stage. I'm not sure, I can't say what's going to happen in the future or what will happen for him. But I can't say that there's been anything that's been difficult. He's so healthy, and I haven't gone, I don't know what, maybe once I go back to work, once that could be different, that it might get a little bit difficult, but I had a dream first year.
Oh, that's fabulous. That's all anyone could ever wish for.
It is. Yeah.
Well, Meg, sharing that story, as I said earlier, there'd be a lot of women who have gone through their own struggles with falling pregnant and going through IVF who can absolutely identify the highs and the lows that you would have gone through. And I'm just so thankful that you've shared that beautiful story with us, and for being so open and honest. So many thanks.
No worries at all.
Yeah. And so what are you looking forward to most in the future, Meg?
Well, I think it's now building my life with George and just being his mom and looking after him and helping him grow and be who he wants to be.
Yes.
And I think through this process of having to, give up beliefs that I had, was given to me, I suppose, as a child, is to try and, of course, no one is a perfect parent, and there's no way I would even aspire to that, because I think that's actually quite scary for a child.
Yes.
To have someone that never makes mistakes, but to be able to apologize for that and to help him grow the way he needs to be. And I think it'll actually help in my business as well, just to
I'm sure it will. You see things through different eyes when you become a parent. Yeah. No, I look forward to seeing how it all unfolds for you and George too in the years to come.
I'll let you know.
Yeah. Now, Meggie, if you could look into the future, what do you hope 80-year-old Meg is going to say about current day Meg?
Some people now say, how did you make that decision to do that? And I just think, what if I didn't make that decision? What if I let the fear drive me? the fear of having a child on my own, or the fear of going through another cycle, or the fear of being a failure, which is the thing that got me before, is that I would ultimately do the thing that might work, which was go to South Africa, and it would still not work.
Yeah.
At least I knew that I'd tried everything.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. You know, if you can get through that, you can get through anything, Meg.
Well, I can definitely have a crack at it.
You will, and I know you will.
Thanks, Jo. Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much again, Maggie, and I wish you and George all the very best, all the love and happiness in the future. And yes, thank you for sharing your story with us today.
It was my pleasure, Jo. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening and sharing your time with me today. I'd love you to hit subscribe on Apple Podcast or your favourite podcast app to keep spreading these empowering messages. Please share this podcast with other incredible midlife women in your world. Join me again next week for another redefining midlife conversation. Thanks again for tuning in.